And welcome into the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, or maybe, just maybe, you got a moment to sit back, relax, and listen to your favorite podcast. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're at, thanks for being here and thanks for tuning in. Today, we have a deeply personal and powerful conversation today. My guest, Kit, has an incredible story that many fathers might never imagine to face, or maybe you've gone through it yourself and you're looking for that one podcast that you can relate to. Kit has raised 5 children as a single father after a devastating loss of his wife to breast cancer when his youngest was just 6 years old. While this is a difficult story for Kit to talk about, he has agreed to be willing to share the insight into, raising the 5 kids by himself and the fatherhood, and many dads may never get to experience what he has gone through. So God bless you if this has been you, or, God willing, this will never be you. His journey has taught him valuable lessons about parenting, resilience, and what it truly means to show up for your children every single day. Beyond his personal story is a successful entrepreneur, an author, and social thinker focused on equality, the working class, and unseen forces shaping our society. But today we're focusing on fatherhood, family, and the lessons he's learned through loss, love, and raising his kids alone. So, a little bit more about Kit. He is also the author of the new book, The Concierge Class. It's about an unseen group of middle class professionals who work for corporations and the ultra wealthy, and they're magicians. They're the magicians, the enablers, and the pushers and the suppliers. So very interesting concept there. About his book there. He's run his own company for 2 decades, the entrepreneur. He's not anti-business. On the contrary, he understands the challenges that the small and medium-sized businesses face, and he has firsthand experience on the way large corporations fix the market to the detriment, he says, of their customers and suppliers. So with all that in mind, make sure you grab a juice box, grab a snack, and let's jump into the conversation. Kit, first of all, thanks for being here and thanks for joining me today.
I'm privileged to be here, Jay. Thank you.
And I'm privileged to have you. I'm really excited to have this conversation because I know this is a hard conversation, right? That is going to be hard to have. As you shared with me, this one isn't something you normally talk about on the podcast, right?
No, I don't. No.
But you were gracious enough, for whatever reason, shared it with me as we were talking, and I asked if we could dive into it because I truly felt that talking about spousal loss is something that I don't really see a lot of people doing, right? Because it's such a deeply personal topic and can be really hard to talk about. Can be really hard to open up about. Can you kind of take us back to those early days, or kind of when your wife had passed and lost her battle to breast cancer? Can you kind of take us back to those early days? Like, what was it like as her battle against cancer got closer to the end, and the new reality was starting to set in?
Sure. I think I never thought that she was dying. She just felt sick and ill, and I gradually took over more of the responsibilities of caring for the children, the day-to-day stuff. And I think no one actually ever said she is going to die. Or if they did, I never really took it on board. It's something that you wouldn't really be able to come to terms with. I mean, maybe nowadays, maybe more people would be saying this and talking about it, but they were quite removed. I mean, there was a hospital staff who would deal with the cancer, and I would drive us to and from the hospital, and she would have treatments, but then would go back to the house, and it was almost business as usual. And then as time went by and she got more and more sick and she would spend more time in bed, and it still didn't really occur to me, or maybe I just didn't let my brain, or my brain didn't let me accept or visualize that. So there was no preparations for death. So, and then it just gradually happened and she faded away, and one day she wasn't there anymore. So yeah, you call the doctor and then, it changes really. Strange. But there are, as I was 40, I looked up the statistic, there's 42,000 um, women die every year from breast cancer in the States, and a proportion of those will be moms, and therefore a proportion of the men will end up as lone dads. So yeah, I would hope that it will never happen to any of your listeners and followers. But I guess also, for what it's worth, I have learnt lessons as a result of being a lone dad that are applicable to anyone. Hopefully there are 99% of your followers who will never experience this. But if you are a lone dad and you therefore get more responsibility for your kids, then, well, first of all, it is actually a gift. It's a gift that most dads don't get because you share the responsibility, so it's only half the responsibility. But also, I think a lot of dads, their role is to an extent can't be specified. It can't be limited. Like maybe you do the fun things. Maybe you take the kids out to the ball game. Maybe you play fun. Maybe you play football and all that kind of stuff. Whereas maybe, and I know it's still a gendered world, but maybe the mom is closer to the biology and the birth and all that. And therefore kids are naturally going to gravitate towards their mom. So yeah, if there's any information that I can pass on to your followers, then it's a win, isn't it?
Absolutely. Oh, and it's a one of those topics that's, you don't wish this on your worst enemy, right? You don't wish this to happen to anyone. While it is rare, uh, is it does happen to many men that I do know. I've seen men lose spouses. I've seen friends from college who have lost their wife. Um, just in their 30s, 40s, and so it's a very real thing, right? You don't think of it, uh, and you don't think this is gonna ever happen to you, and then one day it just happens. I guess let's wind back a little bit further. Uh, when she first got diagnosed with the breast cancer, was there a lot of optimism that, we're gonna beat this, we're gonna be fine, everything's gonna be okay?
I think you always think you're going to beat the disease, and also there is, and this has been mentioned in various places, there is a certain, I won't say stigma, but if someone dies, then, or is at risk of dying, there is a feeling that somehow they are to blame. They didn't fight enough. And there is a lot of words about fighting. And maybe psychology is important in certain kinds of cancer. Maybe it's not. But I think it is dangerous to assume that you can beat the disease purely by willpower. And I think worse too, if you think you can beat the disease by not taking the advice of proper registered specialized medical professionals. So there may be chemotherapy, there may be radiotherapy, there may be unpleasant side effects, but I think it's dangerous to take the advice of non-professionals in terms of taking what I would regard as woo-woo medicines or medical paths that may give you some sort of hope, but actually they may shorten your life, I fear. So, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's best in terms of, like, medicine, and I think I think those are terrible names. I'm just kinda hearing them now because I always just knew them as radiology and chemo. I didn't know there was radiotherapy and chemotherapy. Um, there's not really anything therapeutic to it, along the way. So I just wanted to bring that up, but yeah, I 100% recommend kinda, where you're at here to also, follow the advice of medical professionals who have seen this hundreds, if not thousands of times and dealt with it hundreds of thousands of different patients. If they recommend to cut it out, cut it out. If they recommend to do this, do it, kind of thing. Of course, if you're able to and whatnot, and kind of thing, I wouldn't really follow the advice of like Kit said, woo woo medicine. There, can definitely agree with that. So, actually, I guess I want to also get your perspective, but from the kids' perspective as well. What were the kids' reaction?
Just say,
So, as
if
a
I can,
as when she got diagnosed and as she went through this process, kinda what was going through your head? Because I mean, was it like, were you kinda going, "I gotta keep going for them, I gotta make sure that they have nothing to worry about," kinda thing? Or what were they saying and thinking, and how were you supporting them through all of it?
what I would say, Jay, is that as the 2-year journey towards death happened. As I mentioned, I was taking over more responsibility. You get up in the morning, you get the kids dressed, you get them breakfast, you get them to school. And then in the afternoon, you get them back from school, you get them fed, you get them to bed, you get them to do their homework. And life becomes one long constant rush, just doing the same thing over and over again. And also doing the good stuff as well. You've got to make sure that you're taking them to the park, kicking a ball with them. If they want to make daisy chains or whatever it is, then we go and do that stuff and life goes on as normal. I suppose over the 2 years, they got used to seeing their mum kind of sick and they just kind of dealt with it. One of the things that I feel is that you have to be predictable. You have to give them a predictable life. So in a way, you just kind of keep on pushing through it. I think that if you give your children consistency, if you can actually seem quite boring to them, then it means that they grow up seeing that the world is predictable. And that if anything strange or odd happens, then that's unusual and difficult, but they have a surrounding envelope of normality and that the world is a fairly predictable place. So, and actually, I think this is true. I have other views on being on predictability for kids. So we didn't really ever speak her illness particularly because we're not a family, or maybe I'm not a person who opens up readily. And we didn't know where the illness was going. At any time, she could have uh, gone into remission and she could have lived again. And, so you don't know what is coming. But I think predictability is a good thing. I'll tell you a little side story, if I may. I did some work at one point acting as what we call an appropriate adult for kids who are being interviewed in a police cell, a police station. Kind of volunteer work. I'm sure in America you have similar things where the child doesn't have a parent or a guardian or a carer to sit with them during the interview, not to provide any legal advice because they'd have a lawyer if necessary, but it would be before they actually got charged, and to make sure that the police behave properly and that the child is not upset and that the person understands enough about the child's needs. And I did that for a couple of years. And what I discovered was that the kids who I sat in with lacked parenting. The kids were in care. They were in a state home, typically because social services had taken them away from their parents because their parents had been judged to be insufficiently capable of looking after them, which meant that normally they were drug addicts or they were alcoholics or whatever. And I thought it was a real tragedy for the kids because they were decent kids, all of them. And I thought it was so sad that the parents were unable to overcome their addictions in order to look after their children, because there is nothing more important than caring for your child. And I know that America and other countries have had massive opioid addiction outbreaks, problems, epidemics, and of course, there are reasons for that as well. But I just think what you have to do is to put your child first, absolutely above everything, because they didn't ask to be brought into the world and they need you like they need no one else. And therefore, you have a responsibility to them. And one of those responsibilities, to get back to what I was saying, is about predictability and consistency, and what I like to call as being boring.
Like it. I like it. Very interesting. So they kind of just went through day to day. They didn't really see anything as changing ever
You have
until it
to,
changed.
yeah. So you take them to parties, you get them to their friends, buy them the things they need, they get presents, they get the birthday presents, they get Christmas presents. Life is as normal as it absolutely can be,
Yep.
given the fact that their mother seems to be not well. And there are plenty of kids who go through their childhood where their mom is not very well. And it does happen. And in a way, I think just felt the same that their mom was not well, but everything outside that was normal, I'd like to think.
Okay. Yeah. So they still went through day to day. Everything remained status quo almost, and nothing really changed. And okay, interesting, very cool. Just curious there how that was navigated as
So
they kind of saw the changes happening with their mom, but how you were able to help them continue to navigate their life as just life. Life keeps going, right? And they had to keep going.
in 2025, Jay, some people might say that you need counseling, you need therapy, you need to prepare your child, you need to have in-depth conversations, and that might be a good route for some. I'm not competent to say whether that is or not, but I don't know how you can forecast what's going to happen. I'm not sure that it's necessarily healthy to say to a child, your mom's going to die now.
Yeah, I think it's case by case.
It's case by case. It's another one of my mantras, Jay, is that every child is different and that you have to go with the child's needs, not your needs. So whatever you think is best for them, well, it depends on what they need, not what you think they need, but Yeah, you just kind of go with how they are, and if there is a problem, then you need to address it or have a conversation with it. Big fan of having conversations, dialogues with the child. So that's not talking about the bad things in life. That's just about spending time. As a dad, you need to be able to spend time to talk to your children and have a dialogue and listen to what they want to talk about, because they all want to talk about something different. Girl children, boy children. Yeah, I see it all the time. And I think for a dad in particular, you have to make room for your girl child and accept that your girl child may or may not be different from your boy child. Just go with it. So, yeah, should we have had more conversations? I don't know. Um, should we have had conversations after her death, which we didn't? And maybe we should have, but in a way, there is some research that says if you open up a wound too soon after the wound has happened, then that's bad because it cements in place the pain. But we didn't really have a conversation after that either, so maybe I was wrong, maybe I was right. You'd never be able to do a sliding doors scenario where you go back and run life differently. So you just do what you think is best at the time.
Yeah. And of course, this is a situation that, no, you can't prepare for this kind of situation, right? Because you never think that this is going to happen. You never prepare for this. You can't prepare for this. There is no preparation to be had. And so, as she passed, and then you transitioned into, being on your own. Reality. What was the reality as it set in, of that she's gone, and now you're here alone, 5 kids, youngest being 6. What kind of was the reality after that? How did you balance everything going into that next chapter?
It's the thing, Jay. I was fortunate because I was working for myself. I had a small business. And if you are working for yourself or you have a small business, you can fit your work and your other commitments around your family, around your children. So if I say to a client, I'm busy on that day, but I can see you, I'm free between 10 and 3 p.m., then as far as they're concerned, you're just busy outside those times and you may be taking your kids to school, but they don't know that and you don't tell them that. So I have to say, being self-employed or running a small business for me is absolute godsend because it means I can then commit whatever time I need to or want to my kids. And I have no experience of being employed in the period when she was sick, or indeed after she passed. So I don't know how you would work how things would work if you had a job to and the boss requires you to work 9 to 5 and be at work Monday to Friday. I don't know how you do that, frankly. And if I had any more advice for your listeners and followers, I kind of wonder whether or not looking at, some sort of side gig and whether or not you could build that side gig into a job that would give you the freedom to look after your kids more. That's just one of the kind of thoughts I have.
Definitely. So, I guess as you transitioned it went through this transition and, um, became the lone parent here, what was You know, was there anything different in how you approach discipline, structure, and consistency, and handling like the things that raising them, I guess, by yourself?
Yeah, I just kind of kept on doing the kind of things that I did. So, for example, we had routines when they were small, like bedtime. Some people let the kids stay up late hours. I mean, certainly in certain parts of Europe, for example, they don't seem to have regular bedtimes. I think it's a challenging thing because it means that when the kid gets up in the morning, they may not be as wide awake at school and therefore they can fall behind or just find it more difficult, etc. And I think you can't always enforce it down to the minute, but I think it helps them know how their life is. And I have had kind of house rules. And again, this might seem quite controlling, but things like no phones at the table when we're eating, no books at the table when we're eating because we sit and talk. We don't eat in front of the television. Now, I know that some people have accommodation and housing that means that it's too small and therefore, but I have many people I know who the family eats in front of the television. And I just think, I wouldn't do that because I think you need to have a dialogue with your children, or you need to be ready to have a dialogue with the children. And if everyone is glued to the television, then they ain't going to be able to do that. And yeah, so I had kind of stuff like that. Other than that, it just kind of really, really went on. I think dialogue with kids is really important to kind of put questions to them and hear what they say or listen to their questions, because it gives you engagement with them. It helps them learn how to think. If a grown-up asks them a question, as opposed to the questions they hear in the playground, then they get used to expressing themselves in sentences. And I think it prepares them for life, and it gives them critical faculty, and it empowers them as they get older. So, yeah. And I think also, I think, well, you have to be a role model, and I'm sure other of your guests have said that you do to others as you would expect them to do to you. I heard one of your guests recently talking about, giving stuff to people, homeless people, people on the street. Of course, I don't always have to agree. You don't always have to agree with everything that your guests say, because you have a wide range of guests. But for example, I give money to people who are homeless, and people say, well, you shouldn't do that. You should give them a sandwich or a coffee or whatever, which one of you guests said. My view is that's quite controlling, that they may say, not my sixth cup of coffee or my sixth sandwich today, and you're removing power from them. And I like to give people agency. And I think, yeah, if they're going to take alcohol, maybe I would take alcohol if I was on the street and I wanted to numb the pain of being on the streets. And if I was going to take drugs, well, I'm not in charge of their life. I don't give them agency. If they want to take drugs, that's up to them. A lot of your listeners will say that's completely the wrong thing to do. But I just like to if I was that position, I would just say, give me the money. And if people want to abuse me, that's fine as well. I don't mind that, because I'm giving them the power to do what they want to do. So, yeah. I mean, I've learned other lessons in my time as a lone parent, not to have favorites. This is an interesting one, I think, because you inevitably will be drawn as a dad to the child that you feel is most like you, or behaves most like you, or you have an understanding with, and there'll be others who seem slightly different from you and you don't get on with them as well. So I think you have to be very aware of that and watch out for it. And I have a little mantra that says, if, should we say, my favorite was to be in that situation, what would I do? Would I give them more support? And I think, yeah, I would. So therefore I need to give this other child more support. And conscious about not, because we dads, I think, understand our boy children much better. They are much more like us. They do rough and tumble. They want to kick a ball around, and they want to just fight and do stuff. And I know this can't sound gendered, but a lot of time girl children may not want to do that stuff. I see them playing, and they play differently. And I think as a dad, you have to stand back and say, my girl child, I need to go with what my girl child needs, not with what I want to do. So just because, I may be a sports fan, but maybe my child doesn't want to particularly do sports. Maybe they want to, I don't know, go and do pretend theatre, for example, dressing up and then putting on a play. And therefore you think, yeah, it's great. Let's see if we can find some clothes, maybe dress up clothes, maybe in a like a thrift shop or whatever, and have fun together. That would be kind of cool. So yeah, I think it's one of my other mantras.
No, I love that. I think it's hard not to have favorites, right? It's hard not to be naturally gravitated towards those that are most like you, similar to you. I think that's just even in life, right? Like you're going to be gravitated to those who share similar interests to you, who are like the same things, maybe speak a little bit more similar to how you speak, look a little bit more like you, and what all those other different demographics and whatnot. But it's important to still, support all the kids the same, right? But you also mentioned earlier, like you have to support them in the way that they need it,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
each one of them is different at the same time. They each need a different version of that support. So I guess going through that process of supporting them after their mother passed, and what did you learn from that process about supporting each of them and helping each of them as they went through it?
Give you one example, which is an example I regret. In the playground, the girls like to do headstands, things like that, practice skipping and things. And it might mean, because they had to wear skirts, and therefore they show their knickers and the boys would titter and so on, and therefore they weren't going to do that. But it's very limiting. And I got them identical school uniform that was actually culottes. Now, culottes are basically a separated skirt. It looks like a skirt, but actually it's actually like short trousers, but it looks identical to school uniform. The head teacher said you can't have that because that's not regulated school uniform. They've got to wear a skirt. And I said, well, it means they can't do headstands and stuff in the school playground. She said, it's school regulations. And you need to fight for your kids, right? and I didn't push that up the line. I didn't talk to the school board saying, this is unfair on all girl children because they can't do the things they want to do. How come the boys get to wear trousers and the girls are not allowed to wear trousers and they can't wear culottes, even though they look like skirts? And I regret that I missed that because I'm not great at dealing with authority. It's hard to push back against authority, even if it is, if you like, only, and I say the word very loosely, only the head teacher. But then you think, is my child going to suffer if I kick a fuss about this? How important is it? And looking back, I think actually I should have made a fuss, because actually it would have helped not only my children but also everyone else's girl children as well. So is standing up for your children, understanding what it is they need and what they would like within bounds, and then supporting them to achieve that. Say time together is really important. And I'm sure your other guests have said this, going to the park, doing free stuff, letting them explore, giving them opportunities, giving them time. As dads, we're at work. There is a video I've got where, I'm tapping away on the computer and the child comes up and starts talking to me. I'm kind of at work, and I turn and I say, yeah, great, okay, and then I come back and am I tapping on the computer again, on the keyboard. Okay, it wasn't the worst offense ever. And you can't always, if you're a dad, you can't always give 100% of your time to the children. And you could probably have a house rule. Again, this sounds controlling and all that, but you're saying, to help them understand that there are times when you need to work, because that's how you earn money and that puts food on the table. And they will understand that. But it's just, for me, it's an example of, yeah, that was me not giving my attention to the children.
No, I think it's hard to balance those things, right? And I think if you have five versus one, you're significantly outnumbered there.
Mhm.
Even if it's 2 to 1 or 1 to 1, kids need a lot. Kids need a
Yeah.
lot of attention, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of you as a person
Yeah.
to develop and to just get through some days and whatnot. And some days kids are needier than other days. I think we've all been there. We all understand that. So it can be really difficult to find that balance. But kids also, it is okay for kids to know, also to learn boundaries and to learn, okay, it's not my time right now. When dad's done working, then I get time, kind of thing. Uh, Even though kids, they don't understand all those concepts, but they try to, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I suppose there's another thing I'd say, Jay, which is something, maybe a very brief incident that I learned about my parents when I was a kid, and the take-home message. I'll tell you, basically, my dad sent me to private school, which I didn't ask to be sent to. And I remember him saying once, we're being beggared by you, your school fees, and I'm not sure we can continue this, and you might have to leave the school. Now that sent real chill to my heart, because I thought, I'm gonna have to go to a rough school. We're gonna have to move house. I'm gonna, you know, and that was a real emotional blow to me, which I had to carry for a little while. And I looked back on that, and when I was a father, I thought, I still am, obviously. I thought, you don't want to put emotional pain on your children about stuff that you're going through. So I would absolutely do my best not to put anxiety on my children. If I have an anxiety about money, it's not their problem. If I have an anxiety about my relationships, it's not their problem. So yeah, I think we keep quiet about that stuff. And it's really hard, because sometimes your kids are your friends. Sometimes they're your best mate, and you really feel the need to start opening up your heart to them. And there are things that they don't need to know about, because it just puts responsibility that they can't do anything about. I wasn't able to help my father with the income. I couldn't do that. I was just too young. And I don't blame him for that, because we're all human, and I'm sure the anxiety was getting to him, and he must have felt that he was letting me down. But yeah, I would say, let's keep our anxieties to ourselves and not talk to the kids about it.
Yeah. No, I think that's important as well. We gotta, some things we have to not burden onto our children, right? We shouldn't be burdening our children with our own uh stresses, anxieties, and passing those things to them, because it's not for them to carry, right? It's not for them to deal with. It's not for them to carry. It's not for them to worry about, right? That they're kids, like they can't do anything about it. Uh, and our kids aren't, like, they're there for us, but they're there for us in their ways, right? If we need a laugh or a smile or someone to hang out with or, play with or interact with kind of thing. They're not there for our emotional things, right? Or we're there for them for theirs, but they're not necessarily there for ours, as especially as children. But maybe as they get older and whatnot, relationship and things kind of change and those dynamics change and whatnot. Because I like my dad and I are definitely there for each other more so since about I don't know what year was that. About how many years ago was that? It was 5, 6 years ago. Since my
So
younger
maybe
brother.
when you got to about 18 or whatever, then you become more of a friend, don't you? Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, I think so, something like that. But for me and my dad, it was definitely like that. I think for me and my dad, we always kind of had more of that relationship, to where it was rarely supported like towards each other because I'm the oldest boy.
Mm.
And I hadn't lived with my dad until I was like 14 or yeah, 14 or so. And so, I kind of came in as like already a full grown, young man and whatnot. And whatnot. So it was a lot more of those friend things and developing that relationship and learning those things like person man to man kind of thing. Not more so a lot of father to son things, but a lot of just person to person kind of things. And we always kind of had that working relationship together as well. And now just more so than ever the last 5, 6 years since my younger brother passed away him and I are just extremely close. He'll call me randomly. He's having a rough day and needs to vent, things like that. I was having a crappy day yesterday, and I'm just thinking I'm just gonna call my dad and just complain about work because I know he's gonna listen. I listen to him, he can listen to me, kind of thing. So we share that relationship now, more so. But I guess going back here, and we talked a lot about the children and their processes, but I want to talk about you a little bit here. How did you process your own grief along the way?
So if I was somewhere where no one else is going to be for at least 10 minutes, I would have a cry. So typically that was in the car. So if I was going to a grocery store or somewhere further afield, that's what I would do. But at other times, your shield is up and you behave like a normal human being because you have to for your kids and because you can't go around the streets crying because, you know, it's not what we do. So when you have somewhere that you're really private and you know you're not going to be interrupted because you're in your car and no one get into that car and you can always, if necessary, keep on driving until the crying jag dissipates. So that's how I dealt with grief. And for what it's worth, I would also say, people say you get over it. I don't think you do. Don't think you do at all. All those years later, it's still a pain, still a wound. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's normal. I think that's 100% normal. So, did you reach out to anyone? Were there any mates or anyone that you reached out to, family, friends, while you were going through your grieving process?
I would hope that dads, if any of your dads get to watch this, or if they ever were to suffer that, they would have people around them. And I can't say I did. There was, for example, my mother-in-law who has since passed, and so it was her daughter. And possibly because she was so afflicted by that daughter's death, and also she had lost her husband many years before that, and so she was in a little bit supportive of she would take kids on like a Wednesday evening overnight. But as time went by, each of them found that her support was not what they wanted because she wanted to baby them. And I don't say that to criticize her in any way because that was what she knew. And so one by one, they would come back over a period of, say, 4 years, and they'd stop going. And I would have liked that Wednesday off. That would have given me good free time and so on. But yeah, um, they kind of outgrew her, and she was not able to do that. And I can't say it's not true. There was one family, and the mum who was the family was family were friends, and yeah, she would like go to see her in the hospital, and that was quite surprising to me. And I thought that was a very decent, very human thing to do, and nobody else did. And it was kind of, I won't say it was isolating because I never expected to be in any other way. And if you're bringing up kids, you don't have time to socialize. You know, you can't go down to the pub or whatever. And also, the other thing is people who've not been bereaved don't know how to deal with the bereaved. Like, what do you say to someone who's lost their wife? Oh, I'm so sorry. And there are platitudes, but most people don't know how to deal with it. So I think if any of your followers were had the misfortune and that their wife or partner had the misfortune that they would die, I think you would not be surprised if people didn't say anything because they wouldn't know what to say.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
it makes sense. Sorry, because I mean, what? There's nothing to say, right? There's nothing. There's no good thing to say. There's no right thing to say to in that situation to get through it.
can't
So
and you can't really, if your kids are young, you can't really go off to a bar with your mates. You can't do that because I suppose you could get a babysitter in, I suppose, but I was never very keen on other people being in the house, frankly, because I felt responsibility to look after my kids. You become maybe
yeah, do you
protective
feel?
of them. Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, it would be absolutely great to have someone you can unburden to, but then how can you unburden someone who's never experienced anything like that? These days, I think there are more organizations um, for lone parents, for people who've suffered bereavement. And there was even in my day, but I never felt, do I want to sit in a group of other people whose wife has died? No, I don't. Because
Yeah,
I
it's
have to
kind of
get
one of
on
those
with the
things. Like
present. I have to get on with the
in
living.
theory, it sounds great, right? In theory, it sounds great,
Yeah,
but I don't know if I actually want to go and do that. And sit there with a bunch of people who are also, just sad and lonely and depressed
yeah,
and whatnot, and
yeah.
um, you know,
Some people would get support from that, and that would be great for them. It's whatever. The thing I have found is that there is no way of dealing with death, no one way of dealing with death. One best way. You have to just deal with it the way that your brain tells you to. And as long as you're looking after your kids, that's all that matters, really.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Some things would be nice, right? But at the same time, you have responsibilities, and those responsibilities are 5 children. So you got to prioritize and whatnot. Was I guess for you, this is a related question in some sorts, but since your wife passed, has there been any personal relationships that you've had?
yeah, absolutely. I have remarried since, like about 30 years later, and I've had a couple of relationships since. And I wouldn't say, and I never felt very easy about that because my children, I think, inevitably feel close to me and I feel close to them, and no one can take the place of their mother. And those relationships have tended to be somewhat distant relationships, whether that was intentional or not. But they haven't been people living next door. Do you know what I mean? So therefore, the kids didn't see very much of them. It was all kind of weekend kind of thing. And I don't know whether that was me being defensive or not. But eventually, as they get older, they will accept. They have to accept that without in any way forgetting their mom, that you as an individual, as a father, also need to have companionship and affection from someone else. And that is an inevitability. And there are cases, in fact, normally, I say normally, in the rare occasions that the mom dies, then often the husband or partner very quickly finds another partner. And I couldn't do that either because I didn't want to share my children or because I was too concerned about my children's well-being. So for whatever reason, I never really wanted to get too close to another woman for, a good kind of decade or so. But eventually you do, and it's all been for the good, really.
I think it would be tough, right? Because you're right. A lot of people move on really quickly, and it's something that to each their own at the same time. But at the same time, there's that pain there, right? To where, it's not the same. It's not like it was divorced. It's not like there was any ill feelings or anything, right? It's not like there was anything that was bad, going into it. There was
I
no
think,
the break wasn't clean. It wasn't a clean break. It was very
I think,
yeah.
yeah. I think if it's divorce, I don't have that experience, but yeah, you would need to explain to your kids that, mom and dad love each other, but in a different kind of way, and they are not getting on very well together, and that kind of conversation,
Yeah, yeah.
because it needs to be discussed. But as you say, Jay, there is no answer to the fact, he died. There's nothing really else to say, other than some people would have lots of conversations, and I haven't. Everyone has got to do it their own way and listen to the kids as to what they want. And I don't know if my kids have not raised it, is it because they don't want to raise it with me or because they don't want to raise it full stop? I have no idea.
They each have had their own life to live since and their own grief to deal with in different ways, right? And that'll show, I'm sure that's shown as they've gotten older, as they've grown up, that those things have come out in different ways to navigate their lives. And I'm sure they've had those conversations, maybe not with you directly, but maybe with other people, and they've been able to process on a different level.
I know some of them have encountered other children who've lost either their mum or their dad, and I'm sure they will have had that conversation. And also, as a family, as the five children are very close together, and it's kind of like some people think, they hunt in in packs. Um, but I think that was indicative of the fact they get comfort from each other rather than seeking other people's input into how they feel. That's just my guess.
I mean, were there ever times that you witnessed, I mean, like, the older kids comforting the younger kids? Like, the younger kids would maybe go and, talk with the older ones, say, "I really miss mom," and maybe they would cry together or talk and, be there for each other in ways that maybe you couldn't, or couldn't, it wasn't the same, right?
Maybe they had those conversations when I wasn't around.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know. I would also say, and this is slightly off the point, but it's the same issue as to have any of them gone off the rails at any point? Have they shown challenging behaviors, which you would kind of expect if you were a psychologist or a
Yeah, no,
psychiatrist?
absolutely.
And the answer would be, yeah, from time to time. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they are harmed. They have been harmed by their experience. And even if you don't lose your spouse as a dad, you can expect pushback from your child. You can expect hostility. Sometimes they will challenge your authority, or they always do, and they will pick up bad habits. And I've known the best of parents whose children have gone off the rails. One of my beliefs is that if you're a good parent and it happens to you, it's not your fault. It just happens. And all you can do is love them and stick with them and support them. I've never been in a position whereby one of my children has completely gone off the rails, but I don't think that's due to my skills, lack of, or experiences or anything else. I just think sometimes look at the roll of the dice. Sometimes your kid goes off the rails and sometimes they don't. Because there are many other influences in their life. There is teachers and then there is friends and there are bad friends, good friends. And all you can do as a parent, as a dad, is to love them and be there for them. And I have no experience of dealing, for example, how you would deal with continuing addiction, which can turn people into, I have seen liars and thieves and all kinds of bad behavior. Criminal behavior, even. It's not happened to my children, but sometimes you think, maybe did we get close to that? Maybe. There are plenty of outlets for alcohol, plenty of outlets for illegal drugs, and you never can tell. And I am not someone who would be able to say how you deal with that because it's a big unknown to me, other than you be there for your kids. That's all you can do.
So just a few more questions here. I have some lighthearted questions to end us here. Before we get into those, is there anything that you would go back and share with yourself? What any wisdom that you would go back and share with yourself as you were going through it now, being many years removed and on the other side of it? Anything that you would go back and tell yourself?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? Would I have had more conversations with my wife? I don't know. Would I have had more conversations with my children? I don't know. Would that have been better? Maybe. Maybe, yeah. It's so hard to tell because you're just caught up in a day-to-day busy life. And it's stuff that I have learned from my experience of bringing up my children, that I have learned from that, but I'm not sure it's only from observing what I did in the past. So in a way, the past has taught me stuff rather than my more recent experience have taught me anything about what I could have done better or differently. I don't know. There must be something, but uh, I think I would say to my former self, you just got to keep going, pal. Got to love your kids. Got to do what's best for them. Don't put your own judgment, your own views on them. Let them discover their views. Other than the difference between right and wrong, yeah, that's what I'd say.
Amazing. Kid, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I know it's not easy. I don't think these wounds they never fully close, right? They're always scars and they're always open. They're always there. And I think that's good, right? You never really, like you mentioned, they're always there, and that's a good thing. They should always be there, right? Like people I've lost, my brothers, my grandpas, and other people I was really close with that I've lost. You know, those things are still there. There's still time to times to where I'll hear a song or some music, or be thinking of a grandfather of mine, or my brother or something, and you know it'll just hit you. It just hits you sometimes randomly that you don't expect, and that's okay. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
that. It's okay
absolutely.
to have that. Hold on to that. Hold on to that love. Hold on to those feelings. Hold on to that. Not forget that person. And remember them for who they were and who they are, and all of that. So I think that's totally normal. And this is a tough topic for many. Many have experienced this. 99% haven't and won't, but there's
Yeah,
many that will.
yeah.
And I think it's important to share our stories and to have our stories hopefully be a blueprint for the next person. So.
I think there's this story, Jay, about a starfish on the beach. Do you know the starfish on the beach story?
Mm.
No. Basically, a small girl walking on the beach with her dad, and she lives in a part of the world where there are storms that come up and where the starfish live and throw the starfish up, and there's hundreds of them on the beach, and she picks up one of them and she throws it back into the sea, and the dad, who's maybe having a bad time, I don't know, and he says, well, yeah, well done for that, but you can't throw all those hundreds of them back. And she says, yeah, but for that one starfish I made a difference. And I think that's what this podcast is about, that if there is one person who gets any benefit, any solace from our conversation, then that's lovely.
Yeah, no, that's what it's all about. It's always impacting the one, right? I think about that often. Jesus left the 99. He went to find the one. He went to find the one sheep, whether religious or not. But it's a great parable. Leaving the 99 to go find the one person that needs to be found,
Yeah.
and brought back to the flock. So in some way, shape, or form. But all right. Well, let's jump into the dad zone here. So the dad zone is designed to, well, kind of be the perfect ending to conversations like this that are maybe a little bit heavy, and to bring some fun back into everything and to have some enjoyment. But again, very very important topic that we discussed here today, and I'm sure the listeners will find it very helpful. So first question here in the dad zone: does pineapple go on pizza? Never. Good. Good. Is that like that's good. That's good. Great answer. Perfect answer. Perfect answer. Who are three people, dead or alive, that you would invite to a dinner party?
I would like, and this is counterintuitive. So, for example, I would like to invite Donald Trump
Interesting.
because I need to know what's going on in his mind. I need to know if I can learn anything from what's going on, and also if I could maybe tell him where I am and what my thoughts are about the world. And if we could come to some sort of understanding, I think he and I would both benefit each other. Other people, if I look at American politicians, I am a big fan of those who are not part of the uniparty. I've heard some of your guests talk about the fact that social democracy, that liberal democracy is not really solving the problem for the working man and woman. And I absolutely agree with them. And so I'm a big fan of people like what you call well, there's Bernie Sanders, for example, and Casey, whatever her name is called, Cortez or whatever. I just think these are interesting who people. They are standing up. You can disagree with us, absolutely, but I think they're standing up for working people. There is a massive growth in inequality in America and in Britain and in Europe and everywhere else. Massive inequality that we haven't seen since the end of the First World War. And the rich are getting richer, massively rich, and the average Joe and Joanna on the street are getting harder. Their jobs are precarious and their housing is precarious. And I would love to listen to people telling me how we're going to solve this problem. That's not very amusing, is it? There you go.
Table of politicians, but it's very interesting at the same time to kind of see thought patterns there. What is your guilty pleasure food?
My guilty pleasure of food is um is onions that you can pull out of a jar. You know those kind of pickled onions.
Okay, interesting.
You wouldn't want to smell my breath afterwards, but yeah, they're fun.
I love it. And then very last question here, in the dad zone. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a new dad? Let's say he's really young, 18 to 22 years old, who's just starting out his fatherhood journey.
Yeah, I mean we've talked a lot, haven't we, Jay, about
Yes, sir.
what we say. We'd say, give them affection. My parents never hugged me because they were old-fashioned, and I just think giving someone a hug, especially for a child, tells them that they are surrounded, they are enveloped by love. And I think that's the really important thing they need. That helps them get them through the world, get them through the day.
Absolutely.
That's not
Absolutely.
very
Well,
amusing either, is it?
no, but I think that's a great answer, though. I think it's exactly what we miss sometimes, right? We miss the simplicity of just showing affection and giving hugs. So, Kit, this has been an incredible conversation, one filled with rawness, honesty, wisdom, and resilience. For listeners who want to connect with you, learn more about your work, or check out your latest book, where can they find more about you?
So it's available on Amazon, and I love people to tell me what they think about stuff, good and bad. So they can find me on my name, kitsadgrove.org. kitsadgrove.org.
Love it. Well, to all our listeners, if this episode moved you, encouraged you, or made you think differently about fatherhood, share it with someone who needs to hear it. If you know another dad, another parent who has gone through these things and they're just, man, they just need something to relate to, share it with them as well. And until next time, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and stay connected for more meaningful conversations. You can find more of this podcast at Young Dad Pod on all social medias, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and just anywhere you use social media at Young Dad Pod. And until next time, stay steady, stay strong, and keep leading your family with love and resilience.